And we're talking playoffs now. So, Heath, I think you mentioned it. We talked about it maybe on a Sunday night show. It's hard to get a handle on some of the matchups here. Things are changing so much. Oh, this was a good matchup. Now it's a bad matchup. This was a bad matchup. Now it's a good matchup. So I wasn't going to do this exercise, but I do it every year. I would say backed by somewhat popular demand. I did have some requests for it. But in general, we're in week 12. If I tell you who has good matchups in weeks 15, 16, and 17, how much is it going to matter to you? And you won't hurt my feelings if you say it won't.
I'm hoping that you tell me something that I care about in the next 15 minutes. I think a lot of you're probably just going to have to say, well, yeah, but does this matter? Yeah, but yeah, there's gonna be a lot of yeah buts. But I think there's a possibility that we're going to unearth a couple of things here that are actionable.
I think we will. I think especially the two that come to mind just right off the top are Trevor Lawrence has a terrible schedule and Joe Mixon has a terrible schedule. And now, I think anyway, we can go into that in a little bit.
The Trevor Lawrence one I think matters. The Joe Mixon one, like we've seen multiple, maybe 3 different games this season where he's averaged 3 yards per carry or less and scored 16 or more fantasy points.
I think his schedule caps his upside. I'm not saying he's going to be bad. He's going to score 8 points, but I think he might be more in the 15 range than give you that 20-point week.
Yeah, I mean, I just look and like week 1, he played the Steelers when they were at full strength. He averaged 3.04 yards per carry. He did not score a touchdown, and he scored 21.5 fantasy points.
Wow. That game went to overtime. Didn't they run like 70, 80 plays or something? But okay, fair enough. Keep going.
Week 4, he played against Miami. He averaged 2.5 yards per carry, 3.2 yards per catch, and still scored 17 fantasy points because he scored a touchdown.
Yeah.
Like, it's just his volume, it's very similar to James Conner, except that he's also on a really good offense as well. And so I think the interesting thing is if you're locked into the playoffs with Saquon Barkley, do you try to get Joe Mixon for him?
I think I'd rather have Mixon even with the schedules. But
right. I'd much rather have Mixon.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would say let's see how he does this week against the Titans. That's probably maybe his toughest matchup, but
he might even just take that one off.
Not playing. So probably not playing. I shouldn't say he's not playing. All right. So anyway,
and the other thing I'll say is, like, after this week, you got 2 weeks before the fantasy playoffs start, and he's got the Chiefs and the Browns.
Yeah, that's great. But it's the Bengals in general. It's not just Mixon. It's Tennessee this week. And the thing is, I had to be slightly subjective because, like, Tennessee, for example, shows up as one of the best matchups for quarterbacks. I took them out. They have been so good defensively for about a month and a half now. And I cannot consider them a good matchup for quarterbacks. So just the Bengals schedule going forward is Tennessee, Kansas City, Cleveland. That should be good. Then the playoffs, the fantasy playoffs, are Tampa Bay, at New England, and home against Buffalo. Now, Buffalo's defense hasn't really been that great. They're not even on paper, they're not one of the toughest matchups for running backs or quarterbacks, I don't think. But if they're healthy, we know that they're better than what they've been, and it's not like you want to see Buffalo on your schedule. Anyway, let's get to it. So here's how I did quarterbacks. I took usually I do like a separate section for top 5 and top 10 schedules. All I did was for matchups against top 5 and top 10 or bottom 5 and bottom 10. I only did one go through, and I did like the bottom 8 and the top 8 matchups. So for quarterbacks, I removed Tennessee. I kept Pittsburgh in there, but I think that's a little questionable. They might be a lot better than what they've been for much of the year. But with that said, Lamar Jackson has a good schedule, but that's because he has Pittsburgh twice in his last 4 games. He also has Atlanta, but Atlanta and Pittsburgh in week 16 and 17.
He has a whole list of, like, are these teams what they've been? At Seattle even. Like, is Seattle a good matchup?
Is he at Seattle? Lamar Jackson? I don't think he's at Seattle. That's Carolina on the next line.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
So Lamar Jackson, I'm not sure there's anything moving there. Carolina, this would be more for DJ Moore, I guess. But in the fantasy playoffs, they get the Steelers, who are 28th against quarterbacks. They've struggled against some wide receivers. They get the Lions, which is amazing. And then they get Tampa Bay. It's middle of the pack. But we're not going to get into Carolina. Russell Wilson, he gets the Chiefs and the Cardinals in weeks 15 and 16. That's outstanding. It has not mattered at all for them. I guess you could say
I'm starting to feel like the actionable stuff is not going to come from the quarterbacks.
Not in the good matchup list, no. Mac Jones has good matchups, whatever. Aaron Rodgers, though, this one actually does stand out. Aaron Rodgers, see, Minnesota is technically not in one of the 8 best matchups. They're 9th. But he's got Miami and Minnesota in week 16 and 17. He's got the Rams in week 15. If Christian Watson is really ready to, to explode here, I think Aaron Rodgers could have a nice fantasy playoffs, especially week 16 and 17. And Chicago is 13th against quarterbacks, but I think they're pretty vulnerable too. And he plays them in week 13. So Rodgers has a nice schedule. All right, the bad quarterbacks. Now, the Giants are on the list as a bad matchup. I took them out. They're so beat up. They're probably not that good. They face very easy opponents. I put in Buffalo instead. Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, this is the worst one that I found. In the fantasy playoffs, he gets Dallas, the Jets, and the Texans. And you may scoff at the Texans. They're 3rd best against quarterbacks. They're horrible against the run. And he's already played the Texans once. He threw 47 times for 286 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He scored 10 points against the Texans. So Trevor Lawrence has Dallas, the Jets, and the Texans. 2 of them are on the road in the playoffs. And the week before that, he gets Tennessee, which on paper looks like a great matchup. But as I said, it isn't. And this week he gets Baltimore. So it's like he really only has, to me, one good matchup rest of season. All right, does that one give you the heebie-jeebies a little bit?
I do not want Trevor Lawrence to be my quarterback.
What about Christian Kirk? Because Christian Kirk has been very matchup dependent. And I gave Schaefer a little homework assignment. Give me a thumbs up if you got that research, Schaefer. Okay. So all right, when you're ready, hop on in and we'll tell you where the upcoming opponents rank against slot receivers. But what do you do with Christian Kirk right now with a tough schedule looming?
Well, he's a must-start wide receiver right now. If your trade deadline's passed, then you're probably just going to start him anyway. Like, I guess when we get to Dallas, the Jets, and Houston, first off, none of Baltimore, Detroit, or Tennessee are making me bench Christian Kirk. It's Dallas, the Jets, and Houston that will be the more difficult discussion, I guess.
Oh, boy. Okay, Schaefer, what do you got? Tell us where these teams is Christian Kirk's upcoming opponents rank against slot receivers in terms of yards allowed.
So we have the Ravens 27th, the Lions 28th, the Titans twice 25th, Cowboys 7th, Jets 11th, and the Texans 2nd.
Okay.
So I want to clarify. When you say second for the Texans, they've given up the second fewest.
Yeah.
Yes.
They have a great slot cornerback. They're good every week against the slot. So the fantasy playoffs are really tough. The next 3 matchups are against teams that have been very bad against slot wide receivers. Tennessee, you said Tennessee twice. I'm assuming one of those is week 18.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. Week 18.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Kirk might have a tough sledding in the playoffs. Other quarterbacks with tough matchups: Justin Fields. We know that. Patrick Mahomes, whatever. Geno Smith. Geno Smith gets the 49ers in week 15 and the Jets in week 17. In between that, against the Chiefs. And Ryan Tannehill. 4 of Ryan Tannehill's next 6 opponents are top 5 against quarterbacks. One of them's the Bengals, who have had really easy matchups. The Eagles, the Texans, and the Cowboys. Those are 4 of his next 6 opponents. If I tell you that, you look at Treylon Burks, does it make you less excited about acquiring a Treylon Burks?
No, he was on the waiver wire, so he's somebody I want to go get anyway and just see if he's getting 8 targets a week, then I'm not sure that'll matter. But it does, like, I've not really bought into the way that Ryan Tannehill has produced recently anyway, so it makes me less want to be influenced by that.
All right, Dak Prescott is an honorable mention. Just because he has Tennessee in week 17 and they've just been so much better. His playoff schedule is Jacksonville, which should be great, then Philadelphia, then Tennessee. On paper, not great. All right, let's go to the running backs here. By the way, would you believe that right now Detroit is not a top 8 matchup? They're not one of the 8 worst teams against running backs. Neither is Arizona. But if you see those teams on your schedule, it's probably a good thing. All right, so running backs with good schedules going forward, especially in the fantasy playoffs. Jamal Williams, 4 of his next 6 opponents are bottom 10 against running backs. Isaiah Pacheco, Najee Harris, McCaffrey, Derrick Henry. So you got Jamal Williams, Isaiah Pacheco, Najee Harris, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry. Heath, from what I've seen, the matchups don't matter at all for Jamal Williams. He's getting his 15-ish carries. He's getting not that many yards. He doesn't catch the ball. It's just he scores all the time. So I don't know if that really matters. But Williams, Pacheco, Najee, McCaffrey, Henry, I gave you the schedules and the notes. Anything jump out at you there at running back?
I think the Pacheco one may have more to do with can these teams score with the Chiefs? Because if they get into shootouts and the Chiefs are throwing a bunch, he's not going to have any relevance at all. The other thing we got to find out, because we haven't seen a lot of red zone carries from them, is he definitely the inside the 10 guy, or will McKinnon come on the field there? Because McKinnon always plays more snaps. But I'm more optimistic about Pacheco looking at week 15 against Houston, because they can't score and they're terrible against the run. I think he'd probably be okay this week against the Rams, and they're a tough matchup, but they can't score.
Yeah, I mean, you look at 4 of their next 6 opponents, the Rams, the Broncos twice, and the Texans. Those teams are probably not going to run. They're probably not going to score much on the Chiefs, so that should be good for Pacheco. Najee has an interesting schedule. It's not great out of the gate here. It's the Colts, the Falcons, and the Ravens. The playoffs are the Panthers, who are terrible against running backs, but kind of in an inconsistent way. The Raiders, and then the Ravens, who are very good. McCaffrey and Henry are McCaffrey and Henry. But you know, Derrick Henry, if you want to buy really high on him, he gets the Chargers and the Texans in the fantasy playoffs. Does he really get the Texans? Because he's run for 200 yards like every time he faces the Texans now. So Derrick Henry could he could be a league winner no matter who his matchups are, but giving him the Chargers and the Texans in weeks 15 and 16, that is not fair. He ran for 219 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Texans last time out. Honorable mention, Latavius Murray. He's got a nice schedule going forward. Carolina's 27th. He's got the Chiefs twice. He's got the Cardinals once in there. So 4 of his next 6 matchups for Latavius Murray are good.
Probably a top 20 running back. It's
bad matchups. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just so dumb.
Bad matchups for running backs. Joe Mixon, we talked about. Nick Chubb, 5 of his next 6 games are against top 10 opponents. I think the only thing that stops Nick Chubb is if they're getting crushed or something like that. I don't think you're not worried about Nick Chubb, right? He's taking a drink of his bubbly water.
Not at all.
How about Josh Jacobs? In the fantasy playoffs, he gets the Patriots, who are number 1, the Steelers, who are 17th but have a good run defense, and the 49ers, who are number 2. That sucks for Jacobs.
Yeah, it's that could be crushing. If you still have time to sell high on him, it might be a good idea. Right. I'd rather have Mixon than Jacobs, but I'd probably, and that's the thing is I don't know that people have fully accepted how good Josh Jacobs has been this year.
Yeah.
So when I say if you can sell high on him, like I'm not trading Josh Jacobs for RB15 value. He's been a top 5 running back this season.
Maybe you'd say trade Jacobs and a number 2 receiver for Henry.
I would love to do that.
Jacobs in a Lazard or something for Henry.
Would do that in a heartbeat.
Matchups. Yeah. Eckler's got tough playoff matchups. Those do not matter. And the Dolphins running backs have the Patriots and the Jets. No, they have the Patriots in week 17. The Jets are week 18. Sorry. They have the Bills in week 15. The Bills are 13th against running backs. If you think they're better than that, then the Dolphins running backs are going to face the Bills, the Packers, and the Patriots in the playoffs. All right. To sum it up for me, the players I'm most concerned about are Trevor Lawrence. I would say the upside for Joe Mixon and Christian Kirk, maybe. Players I'm most enthused about are Derrick Henry, even more so than usual. I would say Aaron Rodgers has a shot at being really good. And Latavius Murray is definitely someone to add. I mean, he's so bad that I'm not like totally buying in, but his schedule really jumped out. And then the Josh Jacobs thing isn't great.
We've got a just one at every level. Like we used to talk about how it was Derrick Henry at the top, and then Nick Chubb, and then AJ Dillon for the not going to do anything in the passing game, but so awesome efficiency wise as rushers that they can still be good or better than they should be. Now we have this huge chunk of wildly inefficient, but going to touch the ball 20 times, so it doesn't really matter, running backs.
I hate those running backs.
I know you do.
hate
You'd
them
much
on
rather
draft
have
day.
the 12 touch guy that averaged 5 yards per carry.
Well, I hate them on draft day because I feel like they're going to lose their job. But at this point, Jamal Williams is not losing his job. Latavius Murray is not losing his job. So I actually like those running backs. James Conner's not using his job.
Conner. Yep.
Right.
David
I don't
Montgomery.
mind. Not yet.
And Joe Mixon's at the top of that list.
Yeah, that's shocking. But yeah.